Hi, just checking we're recording. Right, so we're going to talk about the major project. This is the alternative to doing a fully written dissertation, and this is for master's level programs. So I'm going to talk you through the PowerPoint presentation, and you'll also find this presentation on Brightspace, so you can read through all the details at your leisure. But I wanted to sort of talk about it, try and bring it all to life a bit. The first thing I'll say is, if you're interested in doing creative writing, this is a fantastic opportunity to develop a creative piece to quite an extended space. 10,000 words gives you a good range to develop your idea and explore your creativity. So, what is the major project? The major project is an opportunity to produce and reflect upon a piece of original creative work. Gives you the time and space to develop a strong creative idea using academic knowledge and skills that you've gained throughout your master's study. Worth noting as well that skills and knowledge that you've gained in your previous studies, not just the master's course. There may be ideas that you've begun at your degree course maybe, or just in your own private time, something you've wanted to work on, maybe you haven't had the chance, or you want to develop something a bit more fully. This is a great opportunity to do that, and of course contribute towards your MA. Sounds interesting, yeah. So these items 1 to 5 on the screen now are from the unit guide, and they tell you what you are really going to do if you take on the major project. So by the time you finish this project, you'll have produced an original, coherent, well-articulated and well-presented piece of work. You'll have applied theoretical insight to that work. You'll have thought about theory and practice together. You'll have reflected on the process and explained how and why you made certain creative decisions. You'll have located that work in the context of its professional practice. You'll have looked at the piece of work within the professional field, not just the theoretical and academic discipline, but also how does my work fit into the professional world. And then you'll hopefully by the end of it have really developed your creative expression and your abilities. And I think, to add to that formal explanation, it's a very rewarding piece of work to be able to do. I've supervised quite a few creative projects over the years, and it really is a rewarding exercise for those of you that want to do creative work. So, sounds like it's creative and academic. Okay, that sounds unusual. So yeah, it is. The first thing to be clear about is that it's a chance to develop your creativity to a high level, master's level, but also analyse that work. Any artist really understands what they're doing in the sense of the technique, the subject matter that they've researched, who their audience might be, and so on. So, creativity isn't just about, wow, magic, I've done it, it's amazing. It's also about knowing how and why you've done that. Excuse me, quick sip of coffee. So with that in mind, please think of this as one project with an overarching aim. Don't see it as a creative project. Yes, great, creative writing, and then, oh no, I've got to do some academic work. Think of it as one project with an overarching investigative aim, which the creative and the academic both fulfill. And actually, we use the term practice-led research quite often, and in that context, creative work is seen as research. So in a way, creative and academic aren't really separate. It's just that they're usefully separated in terms of what you submit. It's one project, you'll say, but isn't it in two halves? Critical and academic and creative. It sounds like, okay, two halves, 10,000 words of creative, 5,000 words of academic. Okay, yes, there are two components, but the critical rationale explains the creative work, and the creative work demonstrates what you've been talking about in the rationale. So they're really coming together, they're serving the same purpose. So how do I create a project with one overarching aim when I just want to do some creative work? Okay, good question. Let's give you an example which hopefully will explain it, but when you start to develop your own ideas, you can come back to me with questions. So, have a look at the screen. Say, for example, you want to explore racism in rural England. Well, that's actually a project that I supervised last year. master's student actually was interested in racism, and she'd observed this in her local village pub and wanted to do something with that. Now that could be purely an academic dissertation. She could do research, she could interview people, she could read scholarly research, she could read newspaper reports, watch documentaries and write about it. It could be a purely academic piece, but no, she wanted to do some creative writing as well. So let's think about what the overarching aim might be. And we've put here, how does racism manifest itself in rural England? Okay, that's a good question. How am I going to answer that question? I want to write a radio play. Because I'm interested in radio. I'd like to write a radio script. I'd like to try my skills with that medium. So I'm going to explore racism through the medium of a radio play. And then my rationale is going to explain, discuss, analyse, reflect upon, for example, what work did I need to do? There would have been some research. Maybe I had to talk to people in that village pub where I was observing this racist discussion and behaviour. Maybe I needed to secretly observe and make notes, get a pint and sit there and make notes about what people are talking about. Maybe I wanted to read a bit about racism in rural England from scholarly sources. I might also need to think about, what do I need to do to write a radio play? Do I know anything about radio drama? What do the BBC look for? Go to the BBC Writers' Room. So there'd be a lot of background work, wouldn't there? There'd be a lot of research of different kinds which would serve creative work. So you've got two components, the play and the research that serves the play. And when you hand the whole thing in, the rationale is going to talk about all that research and background and creative process, and the play will show us the result of all of that hard work. So two components, one aim. Hope that makes sense. What kinds of creative work can I do? Well, you can read this as I'm talking, or you can read it later in your own time, but basically you can do pretty much anything you want as long as we can mark it and it will fit the assessment criteria. So I've put a link here to the assessment criteria. If you're going through the PowerPoint presentation and want to hop forward, you can just click on that link and it'll take you to the criteria. Basically, if you're not sure, have a look at the assessment criteria and ask yourself whether what you want to do could meet what the assessment criteria is looking for. But also, when you put your proposal in, we will look at the proposal and help you to work it all out. Okay, so I'm really interested in this, but I'm a bit nervous. It sounds like a lot of work. Have I actually got what it takes to do this? Well, here are a few questions. These bullet points are good questions to start with. Do you have a strong idea? Something you want to explore, an investigative area, a problem, a question like that student had, how is racism operating in rural England? Do you have a sense of where your idea fits within its genre and the medium? Can you see it actually being produced or delivered for in quotes, for real? Have you got a clear idea about your audience? Who is it for? Who am I writing this for? Why would they like it? Do I understand how my work would fit with an actual audience? Can I imagine a complete project, 15,000 words, the creative and the academic tied together under one overarching aim? If you can think of it as one project and it makes sense to you, then good. Can you write well? Let's be honest. If you're going to do 15,000 word writing, 10,000 words, that's going to be creative. Are you a good creative writer? Can you bend your style and tone to suit the purpose? And can you write well academically? Because you do have to do that academic piece. If you can answer yes to those questions, then yeah, I think consider doing a major project. Sounds like you've got what it takes. So I'd like to do a graphic novel. This is an imagined question coming from one of you. What's the word count for a graphic novel? 15,000 words in speech bubbles, that's going to be huge. Well, it is difficult to formulate exact equivalencies. Even poetry, which may be just words, we're not going to expect you to write 10,000 words of poems. So we will discuss your idea, and once the proposal is in, your supervisor and you will agree on what a doable project would look like. We've supervised a lot of these over the years, and we will find a way to enable you to produce the artefact that you want to produce, but which will also get you through the project and be able to be marked. So don't worry too much yet, but obviously think about what you might possibly do in the time frame that you've got. So, the assessment criteria. Okay, that's quite an eyeful on the screen there. So there are 3 slides with assessment criteria on them, and I'd like you to look at those carefully. In red are the details, and in black underneath the red subheadings are my explanations. I'm not going to go through them all now because it will make the video too long. But let's just look at the key headings. Set 1, 3 sets of criteria, and here's set 1. Define and apply an appropriate research topic and framework. So thinking about this as one project, it's going to have one topic that you're going to research. And so therefore, these 4 subheadings are asking you to think clearly about how you're going to go about your research and how you're going to express that research in the rationale and how that research will feed the creative project. So that's the first set of criteria that you need to have a look at. Here's the second set. These 2 sub-elements, just 2 here, are locating your research in the context of the discipline, the academic discipline, but also the professional field. So this is connecting the academic and the creative. You know, if you're exploring racism in rural England, you're going to do some research about racism, but you're also going to then express that research through the creative artifact. So the 2 things, remember, closely linked under one heading. And then the third set, here's the third heading, produce coherent, well-articulated and presented outcomes of the work. These 6 sub-items are all about presenting the work, really. You've got to present the work in a professional format, it's got to be well written, it's got to be accurate, referencing's got to be used properly, the whole thing's got to be expressed clearly and coherently. So that's stuff you're all familiar with, you've gone through a degree, you know about all this stuff, really. But do have a look through it, make sure you're clear and come back to me with questions if there's anything there that you don't really follow. How do I structure this whole 15,000 words and what am I actually going to submit? Well, each person who does a major project is going to submit something different, but broadly we suggest this simple structure, an introduction. The introduction is going to set out what you're doing, why you're doing it, what the overall aim was, and perhaps tell us what's important about it. You know, why do you think this was a project worth pursuing? But you know, the introduction is setting up the sort of terms, the scope of the project. Then there's going to be the creative artifact. Now that could be digital, could be physical. We don't know yet, do we? We'll talk about that down the line, but you'll submit it in a way that we can access and mark. And then the critical rationale, that will be in writing in a Word document through Turnitin. Now, just a note there in red, NB, because of the coronavirus scenario, we think that work is going to have to be submitted electronically because the campus isn't open. Maybe by the time you've got to hand this in, things will be a bit back to normal. You're just going to have to keep your eye on that situation and discuss it with your supervisor. Okay, so is that it? Well, probably not. I've probably missed something or I've probably skipped through something too quickly. So come on to the chat room between 1:15 and 2. I'll probably be there from 1, but I'd like you to watch this video and read the PowerPoints before you come on to the chat room with your questions. And any questions you've got, please ask. And I genuinely always feel excited about seeing what projects come up. And I hope I'll be supervising 1 or 2 of you in the coming months. Thanks very much. Bye.